Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. As always, Matthew's with me in our Texas location. We've got an amazing episode for you today. We took a week off or so. It has been a very hectic few weeks. And I'm not going to lie, guys, I took a vacation. They let me take a vacation and I stepped away, and usually I record double back-to-back podcasts. I didn't do it this week. So all you avid listeners, I apologize for taking a week off, but here we are. We're back at it. I think we've only taken like 2 weeks off the whole year. It's not bad. It's not bad, right, Matthew?
It's not too bad. I mean, the one time we could do an in-person podcast, we missed it. Last week we were all busy and I had come in for the week. So we're going to bring it back to you here digitally. So I'm excited about this topic that we're going to discuss today.
I didn't even think about the fact that you were in last week. We could have done it live. But it feels like it's live. It feels like you're right here with us. So no one knows the difference.
We get great feedback.
Our amazing video team makes it look like, I'm looking at Risa's screen right now. It looks like we're on CNN or Fox News or something. It looks like this is like we should just like sub out our services to some major cable network or something, right?
The different camera angles and cuts.
That's right. The business, whatever it is, Fox Business News, whatever.
Fox
All right, so half the people are like CNN, whatever. All right, let's move on. All right, so we got a podcast question for us, right?
So we had an avid listener. He knows who he is. He's, we always say, bring questions to the table. If you guys have something that's going on with your practice, you're looking to scale, whatever you guys are trying to do, send us an email. You can send me an email at matthew@towerleadership.com, and this doctor does this regularly. And he sent in an email asking for us to explain the differences between organic growth and growth through acquisition. This doctor is a very successful doctor. He's making some growth plans, and he's trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. Should he acquire a dental lab and bring that in-house? Should he look at expanding to buying a practice or just growing out his own practice? So what's the example between organic
I'm gonna read the email you sent me just so we got some fact finders here. So we will quick start this thing. So let me explain. I'm gonna read the question. I'd like to hear from you guys, or I'd like to hear you guys discuss long-term business growth strategies. For example, the difference between organic growth and growth through acquisition. What strategic decisions need to be made in how to grow a business practice? How do we make these decisions? I'm thinking of long-term plans for growth, acquiring competing dental practices, acquiring dental lab to bring in-house, etc., and weighing these against the longer timelines of organic growth. All right. So let's talk through that and kind of break that apart a little bit. So business strategy. Now, remember, we usually keep these podcasts to 30 minutes or so. So I could talk business strategy.
This could be a long one.
Right. I could talk business strategy for days, and we could talk business strategy around, whether we use organic growth or whether we use acquisitions. We could talk about how to acquire team. We could talk about marketplace. Strategy as regards to the market and your pricing structure in regards to the market. And I could just keep going and going and going and going on strategy, because strategy is that there's so many things we could talk about on strategy, but I want to get more specific in the conversation and more specific about this idea of what strategic need to make. Why can't I speak this morning?
Like tongue twister.
I usually do this on Tuesday. It's a Monday, so maybe my mouth isn't woken up yet.
That's what it is.
Right? What strategic decisions need to be made in how to grow a business? Okay, so look, this is one of the ones where when I say vision, okay, let me just stop right there. So what happens is we start growing and growing and growing and growing, right? I give the example sometimes that I met this practice came into me 9 locations. I spent 4 hours with them. I said, why 9 locations? And then they came back, and by the time we were done, they wanted 1 location with 24 operatories. The reason why is they had no business strategy. Mm-hmm. Now, business strategy starts at first with a vision. When I say vision, I think that, by the way, I used to think years ago that everybody could be a visionary. They're not. I realized that. I would say, what's your vision? And they would say, to be the premier dental provider. I'd be like, no, hold on. That's not a vision. And so they were trying to create some kind of like motto or something. I'm like, this isn't a mission statement. This is your vision. And they try to overcomplicate it. And it's like, where the hell are you going? Like if you sit in front of a bank, like that was, where are you going? If you sit in front of a bank and they said, why should we lend you this money? And you should say, because I want to go to $100 million. I need to take on 5, whatever it is, like you got to know where you're going. So the first thing is like, where are you going and why do you want to get there? So, I mean, I think that it first goes into where do you want to go? Like, so in other words, like I want to have, 10 million in revenue. I want to grow at 15%. I want to have 3 locations. I want to have, 10 doctors, whatever it ends up being. Like there is a vision that needs to be carved out first. And so all of business strategy, well, I say all, that's not correct, but a lot of business strategy depends on that, because it's like, well, the strategy needs to be put in place based on what you're trying to do in the marketplace. Okay. And so that's really, really important. Now, when we go down to organic growth versus acquisition, look, organic growth there's some benefits of it, right? I mean, I look at some of these dental practices. I've seen people buy, I dropped some bombs on here anyhow, I'm prior Navy, but look, I've seen some shit that people buy $700,000 for a piece of crap. I'm like, for $700,000, I can go buy an organic practice, drop $100,000 into marketing, and dominate a marketplace and get more patients than this clown. So I think that there's some times where people have to be careful when we talk about acquisition, because typically speaking, acquisition is a faster strategy. But if you're buying garbage, then maybe not, right? So I think that you have to be able to analyze the two, right? You don't want to buy garbage and just assume. Yeah. So I think it's really, you got to be careful on complete generalities. With that said, in general, look, acquisition.
You have to know what the biggest thing with the acquisitions is know what you're looking for. I mean, we always say, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. If someone's, trying to charge us and say they have all these patients, until you truly look into the numbers. And if you don't know what to look for in the numbers, that's why you put advisors around you to help you, guide you, and show you what numbers you need to look for when you look at acquiring a practice.
Don't look at the broker's numbers. I've seen some broker's numbers. I'm like, this is the dumbest thing. Guys, just because they ask for a number doesn't mean that's a number. I mean, these brokers right now are getting rich off your backs. And look, they're trying
to wheel and deal.
Look, in 2008, 2005, I was living in Sarasota, Florida. The real estate market was the highest it had been in the history of the United States of America. A house that was $250,000, $60,000 was going for $600,000, $700,000. I remember walking into an open house one day, and what happened is the house was, I want to say $500,000. It was 1,300 square feet. No backyard, no side yard, no granite. I mean, it was the cheapest house, and it was a waiting list of like 75 people. My point is, that was a shit deal then, it's a shit deal now, right? I mean, don't buy something just because, don't let emotional decisions. If it's a crappy deal, don't let some broker tell you, you're going to miss out on an opportunity. That's just crap. Look, you got to be able to analyze the deal, which is what you're saying. But if the deal's analyzed and it makes sense, then acquisition can be a quicker pace, but that's got to be on your vision. Do you want to get there quicker? The good thing about organic growth is you get to control the team. You get to control the processes. You're not trying to convert people over. You're not trying to unwind people's stuff. Oftentimes when you, especially, one of the things we do is, you come in, you work with Tower Leadership, you come in, you're going to have a better system, better, class of team. You're going to have all kinds of things. When you walk into a practice that's been run like crap for the last 35 years, you're going to have turnover, right? I mean, I talk about this. When you push the organizational ceiling up, you're going to have turnover. So if you acquire practices as a method, you've got to have the operational team that's ready to basically replace everybody, because you might lose 100% of the people.
Yeah. And you have to understand too, when you do acquire that practice, you're probably going to have some people in there that have been in that organization for 10, 15 years. And when you go in there and try to change some of the systems and put different things in place, they're going to push back. So when you're thinking about acquiring, you need to heavily look at the team too, and see and digest and have conversations with them, because it's already a preconceived notion. You're going to come in, you're going to change things. So you have to remind yourself that it's not going to be sunshines and daisies as soon as you acquire this practice. There's going to be a little bit of getting the team on board for your vision.
Well, and I think that it depends on what are we talking about acquiring. Look, here's the cool thing. You can go buy a practice for 400 grand that's probably open up 3.5 days a week. The doctor's been lazy, never done anything. The hygiene's producing nothing. You can go pick up that practice for 400 grand, open up the hours, throw some money in marketing, just like a corporation, these DSOs do, and it's doing 1.6 overnight. Okay, so you spent 400 grand, you got a $1.6 million asset. Well, that's pretty smart, right? However, that's going to deal with a lot more headache, right? Because you're going to deal with a bunch of people that are used to being lazy. I'm sorry, I don't care what anyone says, they're lazy. The systems are lazy. Everything about you're going to have to replace almost the whole team. I mean, maybe leave a hygienist. Yep. The office manager's probably got to go, and everybody else too. So you got to go, holy moly, what am I actually buying? So there can be some difficulty when that acquisition happens. However, you can make a boom, a big buck. Now, ideally speaking, on the other side of this goes back to business strategy, by the way. So, okay, do I want to buy practices? So what we do is when we look at practices, for instance, we say, what is our core criteria? So I would say to this doctor, if I'm going to use acquisition as a strategy, and I look at my vision, I would say, what is my core criteria? What is the criteria that this practice has to meet for it to work for me? So I'll give everyone an example. We have an accounting firm at Tower Leadership. And what I'm doing is acquiring another firm, and I'm going to bring that firm, I'm going to basically combine services because we have so many people wanting to come into our services that we can't get anybody in. So I'm trying to increase capacity. Well, how do I increase capacity? Well, I increase capacity in this case by acquisition, right? By the way, that's what you do. This is something, like I said, we could talk on this topic forever.
Yeah.
The reason why you acquire another practice is to increase capacity. Now, we have a waiting list of people trying to get into our accounting services, so I'm going to increase the capacity. Do I want to go one by one, or do I just want to buy a whole damn firm and bring them in-house, plus I'll bring in their clients? Well, it's the same thing you guys are going through on a dental practice side, right? So I'm saying, so what is one of the things I'm looking at? Part of my core criteria is I want an accounting company that's being managed well, because I want it to run without me. I want the person who owns it now to stay on for a period of time. I want to be able to transition it. I want to slowly bring it back into Tower, but I'm not just going to rip it to pieces, and I need it to be managed and run without me. So there are core criteria that you need to look at and say, what is our core criteria? Well, that's going to be based on your vision. Look, you might want to buy practices. I just had an awesome, amazing practice come in front of me the other day. It's a $3.1 million practice, 20 operatories. Now get this, guys. I mean, look, what could you do with that? Like, think about what you could do with that. So if you look at practices that have 25 operatories, 19 operatories, 16 operatories, 14 operatories, and you say, look, what are my opportunities here? Look, I mean, if you got an office that's doing, 3 million, 2 million, that might be part of your strategy, because you might say, my gosh, I can go buy a practice for 2.5 million or 3 million that has a great management team, if it has one, and the thing will run without me, but they're only open, let's just say that they're open 4 days a week. And you say, well, I can get them open 6 days a week, and I can expand the hours, and I can increase the marketing, and I can bring in a specialist, and I can bring in an orthodontist, and I can, specialist, a different specialist. I can bring an oral surgeon and endodontist and oral surgeon. So there are ways to look at acquisition. Now, if I buy a $30 million practice, okay, or a $2.5 million practice, and I take that practice from 3 to 6 within 24 months, I just cut off a lot of time, guys. I cut a lot of time off. So now, should I do that then? Should everyone just go buy a $3 million dental practice? Well, not necessarily. Now, so goes back to the answer again. It depends on what your vision is. Why are you buying a $3 million dental practice? What is it that you ultimately want? Are you trying to be the number one industry leader? Are you trying to be the best? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to just get more time? Are you trying to get out of the chair? Are you trying to sell to corporate in 5 years? Are you trying to keep it forever? It depends. And so that's why it's a little bit hard, because organic growth has advantages. Acquisition has advantages. Acquisition has an advantage of time. But it might cost you a lot more capital. Depends on the acquisition. It might cost you a lot more capital, because there's technically oftentimes some kind of a surcharge put on that. So you can usually organically grow it quicker. You can grow it more efficiently organically, but however, it's going to take you time. So you got to sit down and look at your own timeline and say, When is it that I want to retire? You guys know I don't actually mean like sit around and watch Fox News, but when do I want to be able to not work? When do I want to have my leadership team in place? When do I want to be able to just sit back and be on the board? What is it, whatever it is for your vision. So if I would sit down first and say, okay, what is my vision for my life? Where do I want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? And I'd get really clear on that. What do I want my life to look like? Do I want to be, own a dental corporation that has 30 offices and I'll just, it's doing $45 million and I have a CEO and COO in place and I'm on the board and it has a clinical director. And do I want that? Is that what I want in the next 20 years or 10 years? And then the other side, or do I just want to be able to practice 1 day a week and do implants and be able to, sustain a 15% growth rate and get over 5 million? What is it that you're trying to get your life to look like? How much money do you need? And then do you want to sell? Or these are all the things you've got to ask yourself. And once you do that, if it's timeline, then you say, okay, how can I get there the quickest? If it's a timeline move, it might not be for you. Okay. So let's just say that we use acquisition as a timeline move. I would be careful on acquisition because there's a lot of garbage out there and the brokers are pushing garbage. And then once I do that, then I start figuring out there's another part of this, which is what's your pricing strategy and what's your unique selling proposition. So one of the things in my, once I've determined that part of it, then I start to say, okay, in the marketplace, now that I know what's my timeline? Why am I trying to do that? What's the purpose? Am I trying to impact people's lives, impact legacy, be able to get on a private jet, whatever it is? And you get there. There's no, one thing I always say is want what you want. I don't care. I mean, whatever it is, you want what you want. And then you start to go, okay, now what's my unique selling proposition? Why should people come to me more than anybody else? Why should they come to my business? What makes us unique? What makes us different? Why would they not pick Aspen or a Heartland office? Why would they pick us to come across the street to? What makes us unique? Because that's part of business strategy, by the way. And then I would figure out my pricing structure. And I would say, because guys, pricing structure has to be part of this conversation because it's interesting. You might want to, you can double your patients or you can double your fees, right? So sometimes what will happen, and I think this is an important part of this podcast, is to say, sometimes we're growing for the sake of growing. Sometimes we just go, couldn't you just increase your fees and create a unique selling proposition that makes you the office that people want to come to and then double your damn fees, make sure, and then you did the same thing, but you didn't have to put out.
And then you get the patients you want, like
well, and then
you want will actually come in.
Well, and then you didn't have to put out so much capital, right? If we can increase our fees by bringing in services, if we can create a unique selling proposition, one of the things that you might find is I don't need to acquire anything. I need to have just enough organic growth to be able to keep up with demand. So I need to be able to increase capacity to meet demand. And then I use my pricing as a mechanism. By the way, you never want to race to the bottom. I use my pricing as a mechanism to control the numbers I'm trying to hit. And it controls capacity, by the way, too. So one of the things that can happen, which is super cool, is all of a sudden now you start to go, man, we don't have to acquire all these practices. All we got to do is be able to stay where we're at now, just increase our fees and be able to increase the fees. And we won't have to put out $5 million going after companies. We'll just organically grow. And that's why this is such a hard topic. I'll take a breath and let you jump in here, Matthew.
I mean, I think the timeline and the purpose is to me the biggest thing. So like use the example of the accounting firm that we potentially might acquire. So when we look at that, we looked at what was happening in the marketplace. So we have people trying to get into our accounting department right now. Like the line is booked up for months. So we looked at it and said, all right, we can do this organically where we can just try to hire an accountant, or we could just fire an accountant. We'll hire an accountant.
That won't get us there, Matthew.
Or bring in something. So ultimately, we looked at it and said, how can we serve people the quickest? We have people that are coming and knocking on our door trying to get into our accounting service, and we can't help them right now. So what's the quickest way we can do that? We know the organic way to do it will take a longer timeline. That's our timeline. It'll take longer. But our ultimate purpose is to help people. We know one of the biggest things in the industry right now is people don't have really good books and they have no idea what the numbers mean. So that's one of the reasons why you started the accounting portion of Tower Leadership, is because you saw so many bad financials that it irritated you. So you wanted to fix that. So now we have the opportunity to go help a ton of people, and we can either do it organic, which is going to take a little longer, or we can look at acquiring someone and helping people right away. So our purpose ultimately is to serve as many people as possible and help dentistry as a whole. So how do we do that the quickest? And that's what we look at as an organization. And that's what makes us determine, all right, does that mean we have to go acquire, or do we need to do this organically? And what do those timelines look like?
Well said. I mean, and that's where... it's hard. And by the way, you might use some organic growth. Obviously, you're going to have some organic growth no matter what, and some acquisitions. So we use, and by the way, you can also use a merger strategy. Okay. I mean, merger, that's why they call it mergers and acquisitions. You could merge, right? And, a saying that I always tell people is like, look, I'd rather own 20% of a watermelon than 100% of a grape. I mean, it just depends on what you're trying to, but that all goes back down to your vision, what you're trying to create and what you're trying to build. So, I mean, merger technically, now I don't love mergers for a lot of reasons outside the scope of this individual podcast, but look, I mean, you could do a merger, you can do acquisitions, but it all goes back down to, if I was sitting, and this is maybe a great way to look at it. You're sitting in front of the board of directors. Now you're the CEO. And the CEO sits in front of the board and says, I want to raise $500 million. And they say, okay, why do you want to raise $500 million? And what is the timeline in which you want to do that? What's the main purpose of it? What's the return? All these types of things. CFO helps you, sits in the meeting, right? Calculates numbers. And so what ends up happening is they start to say, why do you want $500 million? And if you say, oh, I mean, that's a problem, right? So I think it's very clearly, I think people run, but it's like, hold on. If you had to answer to a board of directors, what are you trying to get accomplished? That's the vision. If you answered to a board of directors, what are you trying to get accomplished? Be able to explain to the board what you're trying to do as CEO. I am trying to take the practice to $20 million. Why? See, I mean, the board might say, shit, we're doing great. I mean, profits are good, revenues are good, everything's good. Why do you want to take it to $20 million? I don't know. Well, then you're going to have a problem. So now I say, you got to know why you want to get to $20 million. Well, if we had $20 million, we'd be able to provide this type of a dividend and da. But you'd have to know that. And so that is vision in a nutshell. And I think that's a quick way to say it, is if you're preparing a meeting to the board, you've got to be able to have that conversation. The people with those 9 offices, I said to them, if I was a bank, I wouldn't give you $1. You don't know where you're going. So be very clear on where your business is going. Once you get clear on where it's going, then you can say, I believe we could get there quicker through an acquisition strategy. Then the board would say, okay, I understand. Assume I'm on your board. And I would say to you flat out, why acquisition strategy? And you'd say, well, because we can buy offices of this revenue. Core criteria. If we bought offices that already had doctors that were there that were going to stay in place for a minimum of 24 months, if we had an organization that had the organizational capabilities to drop in our systems, if we had SOPs that we could drop into place, and if we we could say we would have the ability to drop in by these types of practices. They would have a doctor that stays on for at least 2 years. They would have at least 5 operatories. They would be doing over 600 grand, whatever your core criteria is. By the way, I'm not giving you core criteria. So nobody write that down and be like, okay, this is my core criteria. This is what Eric said. I'm just giving you an example, okay? Do not write that down. It was just an example of core criteria. And then you would say, okay, and then the board says, okay, great. Well, how much capital are you going to need? And then you'd have to explain to the board, hey, this is how much capital I need. And then we would say, okay, is there a more efficient use of this capital? And you might say no, and here's why. If we try to do it organically, this is the opportunity cost due to time. If an average operatory brings into our organization this much revenue per month, we would be giving up this many months waiting on the organic growth because we can only grow this fast. Therefore, we would lose this much revenue by growing organically. Does that make sense, everybody? So what you would do is be able to, so that's what I would give you on this podcast. It might be, that's like top of my head, but I think that's a great example. Like, pretend you're sitting down and you have to prepare for a board meeting. The person who sent this in, I know who you are. Let's get on the phone. Present to me as your board what you're going to do. And
that's what I was going to say. It's like, I feel like our advisors and you in specific, these are the questions you're going to ask. Like if a lot of our clients that are listening in right now, you've had this conversation with our advisor and you're like, oh, I don't have enough information. Yes. We always throw the term fact finder. Fact find it. I know, some of you might not be fact finders and some of you are. Fact find everything, because we're going to ask you those type of questions. When you call in, and our advisors and you, Eric, have had this conversation a million times where it's, they just bring up, I want to grow, but I don't really know what I want to do. And then we start asking these questions. Having this pre-prepared at any given moment is going to make you more successful. I guarantee it.
Well, all day long. And then I would say, then go back and say, so I would encourage this doctor to let's jump on a phone call and talk through it. But present it to the board, because I'm a pain in the ass. If I'm really going to be if you really want me to turn full tilt, pain in the ass. If I was giving you my money, I guarantee you I would ask questions that you have to know the answer to. So this is where it becomes difficult to say, well, which one's better, organic or acquisition? That you can't answer it like that. It depends. It depends on where you're trying to go and why you're trying to go there. See, that's the first part. So for instance, let me give you an example of what I mean, okay? So I start to say, okay, I'm going to buy a car. Should I buy a Lamborghini or should I buy a Tesla? Okay. And it's not like the S Plaid or whatever, by the way. It's like the smaller little guy is or whatever. Okay. I don't know what they are, but whatever. Something. So, or even use Honda Civic. Okay. Let's just even break it out. Buy a Lamborghini or a Honda Civic. Okay. And so I want to buy either a Lamborghini or a Honda Civic. How do you make your determination which one to buy? Well, it depends. What are you trying to get accomplished? Does that make sense, everybody? So it's like, well, I wanted to be able to track the car and be able to travel at this speed, this fast. I want people to, look my way. I want to feel better or whatever it is, whatever it is. I want to be able to handle corners at, 90 miles an hour at, okay. That ain't the Honda Civic. That's not the Honda Civic. That's not going to get you there. So we would, as a board, go, no, don't buy the Honda Civic. But if you said, I want a very low cost for maintenance, I want a vehicle that's going to last a long time, I want a vehicle that is going to get great gas mileage, I want a vehicle that is at least a 4-seater, because I want this car for a long period of time, I want to have low maintenance, I want it to, we'd go, we'll get the Civic. Why the hell would you buy a Lamborghini? So it depends on where you're trying to go is the answer to your question. Maybe it's acquisition. Maybe it's merger. Maybe it's organic. Maybe it's both. If you don't have your vision locked in, when you sit down with the board of directors, people like me are going to eat you alive. Now, you are your own board of directors. So you have to say to yourself, why do I want to do all this? Like, why do I want to keep building and expanding and growing and creating? Is it impact? Is it legacy? Is it a private jet? Is it all of the above? Is it to be able to pull back clinically? Why do you want to do this? When do you want to do it? That is going to determine strategy, and it's also going to determine pricing strategy. But for instance, if we want to increase and double our price point, we have to increase marketing spend and increase our unique selling proposition. Well, if we're increasing marketing spend and increasing our services and increasing our experience, instead of acquisition, we'll put the money on experience and marketing. Does that make sense, everybody? So we might move that money somewhere else based on what you're trying to get accomplished. And here's the thing, there's no right or wrong. It just depends on what you're trying to get accomplished. I'll tell you the last story and we'll end this podcast up. All right. This is not this is not what I want you guys to do, but I want you to give you an idea of differences in strategy.
Yeah.
It was probably about 9 years ago, I want to say. I went into this little tiny dental office. It was outside of Gainesville, Georgia. And when I went in, the lights were off. And every time I went to this office, by the way, his lights were off. This guy's lights were off. And I went in there, but this guy was the happiest guy I've ever met in my life. Like, every time he would be smiling. And I kept going to his office time and time again. And every time I'd come there, the dang lights were off and he was smiling. So I finally said to this guy, I said, "Why are you so happy?" And he turned his little sign around that had his hours on it. And he said, "This is why." He worked 3 days a week. He made $500,000 in revenue with a $250,000 profit. I'll say that again. He was making $250,000 a year, working 3 days a week. He loved his life. He loved what he did those 3 days. He was like, "I'm making $250,000. I work 3 days a week. Life's good." Yeah. Like,
what more could you want?
What more could you want? He was turning off his lights to save power, guys, because he was trying to keep his profit margins at 50%. Look, that's his vision. His vision was to be able to not make work a priority, was to be able to come in 3 days a week, see his patients that he liked to see, make $250,000 and enjoy his life. That was his vision, and he was fine with it. And so it depends on your vision. Now, he knew that his vision was to have one office, 3 days, making a 50% profit margin, and doing that for the next 20 years. He would be able to pay for his expenses. He would be able to put his kids through college. He'd be able to do the things he needed to be able to do. And that was fine for him. And he was good with that. He knew where he was going and why he was going there. He was going there because he knew that made him happy. And he knew that it provided joy, and it provided time with his family and time with his wife. And so he knew that. That's the why. Why was he doing it? Because he knew that was creating the quality of life he wanted. Just growth to just grow is just an ego trip. Don't grow just to grow. Like, grow with intentionality, grow with purpose. Know why you're doing it. Maybe you need to stop growing for a little bit. Maybe you need to spend some more time with your family and get your priorities straight before you start keeping acquiring dental practices. So I think it depends on your why. It depends on your vision. Then once you get that in place, then we can go from there and put the strategy in place to hit your vision.
I like it.
Mike, I can't drop this mic, but if I could, I'd mic drop right now.
Watch. Move it out of the screen. Just dropped it for you.
Reed, I can't move it out of the screen. Is that the same as a mic drop? All right, I officially mic dropped for this episode. You just don't know it yet.
Boom.
Right, boom.
Have to tune in on YouTube to find out how the mic.
Yeah, that's right. Like you have to hit something. That didn't even work. That was like a weak hit. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in. I went on to a whole dialogue. This is like a Monday morning. I'm fired up this morning, Matthew.
This is how we get Monday started.
I'm telling you right now, I got about a 4-hour meeting this doctor. I'm coming in fired up. So anyhow,
ready to go.
Hey, you guys have an amazing week. We'll see you next time.